Hello, I'm Steve Cochran, and this is live from my office. Over the next several shows leading up to the 20th anniversary of 9/11, my intent is to have a couple of guests on who are significant voices that you'll know, talk about their feelings, where they were that day and how they feel now, and to give you some perspective from their eyewitness view in the position they held on that day and the positions they hold now. We'll start today with Patty Steele, a very famous disc jockey who turned into a very famous newswoman and show co-host. I had the great pleasure of working with her at Z100 in New York and becoming her friend, and we remain friends to this day. She's a very special person, a very talented woman, and one of the all-time greats, frankly. And she has a story to tell, so we'll get to Patty coming up. Chuck Todd from Meet the Press will join us as well, and I'm talking to a couple of other folks about also being on. It's interesting to note that there are several folks that I asked, one of which really touched me, and I'm not going to give up his name because it was a private conversation between the two of us, but he's a very significant individual in the news business, and didn't want to talk about 9/11, not just in this format or on this show, but in general, because he can't do it without being tremendously emotional. And on that day, from his positions that he held in New York in the news business, he knew something in the neighborhood of 100 people who lost their lives. So it's a crushing memory for him. And obviously I didn't push him to be on to talk about it. But he's a good man, and it's those types of feelings that can only be yours wherever you were on that day, and however it affected you going forward is individual to you. We all know where we were, but what that day meant to us and how the country has spun out from it, recovered, thrived, stumbled, thrived again. And where we are today, it's all an outgrowth of how the world changed on 9/11. So my intent, again, is to give you some perspective from people who lived through that day as we all did, but came at it from a different position than most of us would have. As always, this is brought to you by David Hochberg and Team Hochberg. Thank you for that, David. At 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com, with additional support coming from Wilson Golf and the great people at Kemper Sports and the Cantini Golf Course as well. All right, so again, Patty Steele will join us in a moment. New York Magazine some time ago and the Encyclopedia of 9/11 broke down that day in numbers. And sometimes something as simple as looking at the numbers can really give you good memories, bad memories, but a take on what that day was. And we'll do it this way for now. The total number of people killed in the attacks in New York was 2,753. There were 343 firefighters and paramedics who died that day. Remember, they run in, well, we run out. New York City police officers, 23 died. Port Authority police, 37 died. The World Trade Centers, if you've not been to that southern piece of Manhattan, is on the water, essentially. And the Port Authority police have a very big role to play and had a very big role to play. They still do with the World Trade Center rebuild and all that goes on there. But 37 died on that day. The number of World Trade Center companies in the towers that lost people on 9/11, 128. There were 1,402 people who died in Tower 1, 614 who died in Tower 2. Cantor Fitzgerald is a name you may remember. It's a financial firm that was at the very top of the World Trade Center. They lost 658 employees, far and away the largest loss of life for any single company. The number of nations whose citizens were killed in the attacks was 115. The ratio of men to women who died was 3 men for every woman. And the greatest number of those who died demographically were between ages 35 and 39. Heartbreakingly, there were only 291 bodies that were found, quote, intact. Families who got no remains at all to this day, over 1,717 specifically. The number of people who lost a spouse or a partner on that day in the attack, 1,609. And the number of children who lost a parent, over 3,051. The percentage of Americans, this is an amazing number, the percentage of Americans who knew someone who was hurt or killed in the attacks, 20%, 1 in 5 Americans. Meanwhile, the world changed in many, many ways, and it changed for New York City firefighters in that there were more retirements in the months that led ahead. But more directly, and I salute John Stewart and all the people affiliated with John Stewart in the fight they've tried to do for the first responders who fought on that day to save others, who have suffered with cancers that have developed from breathing in the ashes from the pile and all that were in those ashes. The number of firefighters on leave for respiratory problems by January of 2002, so just 3 months later, 300 firefighters. And that story has gotten worse. 98 fire department in New York vehicles were destroyed. Eventually, 1.8 million tons of debris had to be removed from the site. And that hellscape that was Towers 1 and 2 burned for 99 days. The economic impact was heavy. Jobs lost in New York owing to the attacks, 146,100. And you may remember that it was a short time after that we went to Afghanistan. That incredibly moving speech that President Bush, who'd only been in office a few months, made from the pile with the firemen standing by. Days after 9/11 that the U.S. began bombing Afghanistan, as Bush said, soon they'll all hear from us, the people that brought these towers down. It was 26 days later. Now, of course, we had a number of problems that were an outgrowth here. There were attacks on Muslims that were unwarranted, and attacks particularly on young Muslim men. The total number of civil rights complaints reported to the Council on American Islamic Relations nationwide from 2002 to 2008, over 12,962. Back to the money for a second. The economic loss to New York City in the months following the attacks, $105 billion. $600 million was the estimated cost of cleanup, but it's believed it was much more than that. FEMA spent $970 million on the emergency. 9/11 charities popped up all over. Hopefully, if you donated, you did to one of the legitimate ones, because there were bad folks, incredibly terrible, evil people who tried to exploit this horrific tragedy. But legitimate charities raised $1.4 billion on 9/11. The estimated amount of insurance paid worldwide related to 9/11 was over $40 billion. The estimated amount of money needed to overhaul the lower Manhattan subways was $7.5 billion. $4.5 billion of that came from the federal government. New York City had to find the other $3 billion. The estimated amount of money raised for funds dedicated to the NYPD and the Fire Department of New York families was $500 million. Sadly, the percentage of total charity money raised that actually got to the Fire Department of New York and NYPD families is only 25%. And here we are 20 years later, and investigations into the administrative fees of some of those charitable fundraisers, that still is going on. The average benefit received by each FDNY and NYPD widow was $1 million. There was an 18% increase in law school applications from 2001 to 2002. There was a 40% jump in applications for people that wanted to join the Peace Corps. There was a 50% increase in applications from 2001 to 2002 for people that wanted to become members of the CIA. The number of apartments in lower Manhattan where residents needed cleanup and testing, in no small part because of the asbestos that blew out of the building, and all the debris that came out of the building, was over 4,000 apartments. The number of Americans who changed their 2001 holiday travel plans that were just a couple months later from plane to train or car, 1.4 million people. And the estimated number of New Yorkers suffering from PTSD as a result of 9/11, as of 2014, so this is 7 years ago now, 422 1,000 people. I myself, to be completely honest, feel that I have a little PTSD from that day. I was doing the afternoon show on the radio at that point at WGN, and my routine was to stay up very late and to get up 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning and do whatever I did before I went to work. A lot of days, head for the golf course. But in the meantime, on that morning, my wife, who got up much earlier than I did, woke me up and said there's something terrible going on in New York and that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. We watched together as the second plane went in. And it really hit me hardest when the plane slammed into the Pentagon because there was no end in sight. We didn't know when it would be over. We had 2 kids in school. Most of you listening had kids in school at that point. And the unknowns of that day were just crippling. In the days that followed, the unity that came from it was also in part, and I can only speak about me, but I know many of you feel the same way, was joined by waves of great patriotism, crushing sadness, and overwhelming anger. But a strong belief that we would prevail. As a matter of fact, we had ABC network coverage on the radio at WGN, and I followed that coverage locally when we broke away from it. And the first thing I said on the air at that point, because I thought people needed to hear it and I believed it to be true and I needed to say it, was that we will win. Not win a war. We weren't thinking about it in those terms at that point. But we will bring these cowards to justice as we have. And we will thrive and we will survive. The great sadness that existed then is different than the sadness that we have now. But the partisan bickering and worse that goes on, the horrible things that are said publicly in social media and other places about experts who you disagree with because they don't see your political beliefs to be the same as theirs. These are all outgrowths of what happened on that day, because the domino that fell on that day that led to political change in this country, that led to the rise of the Tea Party, and that led to all the things that changed in Washington. And along that, a parallel line of how social media grew and developed, all of those things were outgrowths of 9/11. It's awful to say, but Osama bin Laden did temporarily win. He got what he deserved 10 years later with 1 or 2 or 3 bullets in his head, but it took a long time. And the pain that people suffered, and I have met many, many, many Gold Star families who lost sons and daughters in combat in Iraq and in Afghanistan. The entire thing and the way it tipped the world on its edge, it's quite amazing we have survived from it. But I just hope that there's a moment of reflection through this 20th anniversary where we try to drop our guard for a moment and be together as Americans and not separate as Americans who happen to be Republican or Democrat, just screaming at each other. It's outrageous. So I guess I would do this. I would ask you, as you listen to these shows, to reflect on your own experience and how you feel about it, and your family as well. And think about what you want to do with those feelings and how you could turn that into something positive, not for all of the country, but just for your community. Start there. It's my long-touted hula hoop theory of life. Stand in the middle of a hula hoop, and anything you can see from there are the things you should work on first. Getting back to the PTSD I mentioned, I suppose in my case, it's because I woke up to it on that day that I always have this feeling. I shouldn't say always. I occasionally have this feeling that the other shoe has dropped again and that there's some awful major news story that's about to happen. I've considered it a great blessing and an honor to have platforms through the years in this great city of Chicago and around the country and all the places I've worked to be able to try to help people. not just to bring them facts and truth, but also some ideas on what to do with their frustrations and their angers. I'm still angry about 9/11. There's a terrific 10-part series, dramatic series, stars Jeff Daniels that premiered on Hulu back in 2018. It's called The Looming Tower, and it is about the run-up to 9/11, and it centrals on the main character, John O'Neill, who was very high up in the FBI and was a pain in the ass to work with, but had great skill and great belief and great patriotism. And he wanted the country to do more, and he wanted the CIA to cooperate with his FBI. He was his own worst enemy, had plenty of demons, and it plays out in The Looming Tower. But the larger story of The Looming Tower is how the CIA did not provide information to the FBI in a timely, accurate, or complete manner, and the fight the CIA and the FBI had about sharing information. At the bare minimum, I would ask you to ask your elected representatives, are the CIA and the FBI cooperating now? And if you don't know, find out. Because if you want my vote, I want somebody who's going to make that a priority. So yeah, my PTSD is that this could happen again, that we are no longer innocent. It happened on our soil. It happened to people who just got up that day and went to work. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I think about the families, the children of those who were lost, who are now grown themselves, and the people that were left behind. Not to mention the people that died that day, including those who had to make the choice to stay in those burning buildings or jump to their death. And so many of them chose to jump because that was the better option. I don't know about you. I don't know that I can watch all of the documentary coverage and the footage to come. So much of it has been seen. I'm torn because I feel like it's a responsibility and a tribute to those who died to remember those last moments of their lives as well. Not just the heroes on Flight 93, but everybody who perished on that day and everybody who lived through that day with a close-up eyewitness view of it as it happened. The guy I mentioned from The Looming Tower, who's portrayed, John O'Neill, he ends up leaving the FBI. He was a guy that had bin Laden in his sights, wanted to get bin Laden more than anyone. He ended up working in security as the head of security for the World Trade Centers, started the job just 2 or 3 weeks before 9/11, and was killed on 9/11 while trying to help people out of the North Tower. You can't make it up. So I thank you for listening, as always, and I do hope you'll take some time to talk to your kids, your grandkids, about the importance of this anniversary. But when we come back, Patty Steele will join me, and in the conversation I had with Patty, she makes a very interesting point at the end that was brought up to her by somebody else in the news business in New York about what New Yorkers think about 9/11 and the effect COVID has had on all of us, and the weight of all of the bad news on all of us. It's interesting, as I think you'll find the entire conversation. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you listening. Please check out the show notes at the end of the episode for all things related to what we talk about here. And subscribe, rate, review, wherever you get your podcast to Live from My Office. I'm Steve Cochran, and we're back after this. If you or a family member is interested in securing a reverse mortgage loan, listen to this invaluable information from Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. Experienced homeowners at least 62 years old secured 44,666 reverse mortgages in 2020, totaling a record $10.6 billion. See, 2020 was bad, but not everything was bad, because these financially astute homeowners are taking advantage of the many benefits from reverse mortgages. That's something you can ask David Hochberg about today. Those reverse mortgage benefits include increasing monthly cash flow. All the proceeds from reverse mortgage loans are tax-free. extending the life of retirement funds, making home modifications so it's safer and easier to live the best years of your life, and afford in-home medical and housekeeping pros to assist you with everything you need to do as life becomes more challenging. Enjoy your golden years without the fear of running out of money. If you'd like more information about reverse mortgage loans from local reverse mortgage loan experts, do what we have done, my family, my friends, my listeners. We call Team Hochberg, 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com, and tune in to Home Sweet Home Chicago, hosted by David Hochberg. It's Saturday mornings at 10 on 720 WGN. Homeside Financial is an equal housing lender. NMLS number 1124061. In my effort to have some stories told about 9/11 on this 20th anniversary coming up, I wanted to talk to my friend Patty Steele. Patty has a long, extremely successful career on the radio in New York City, and currently does the morning show on CBS-FM there, along with the legend Scott Shannon. And she was on Z100 with me, or I should say I was on Z100 with her. For a period of time, but we've been friends forever, and I appreciate you doing this. How are you?
I'm well. I'm actually amazingly well. Anxious still. We still have not gone back into the studios. Been the year and, golly, a little over a year and a half since I've looked at Scott Shannon's pretty face, but here I am.
Well, there are I can think of that as the only upside to COVID.
Exactly.
All right. Now, I don't want to, have this be some big morbid thing, but I think it's important to talk about it because from your perspective behind the microphone in New York, in a platform to help New Yorkers in particular and tri-state area residents get through the initial pain of this, try to process it and all of those things. So take me back to that beautiful Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001. Were you on the air at that point somewhere? Because I forget.
Yes, I was on WPLJ in the morning, an ABC radio station. And the reason I bring that up is because my desk actually was in the ABC newsroom. So it was,
bananas.
It was it actually was this beautiful morning. The guys that I worked with were out of the studio. The phone rings, the phone guy picks it up and somebody's on the line saying, a missile just hit the World Trade Center. And, you work in music radio. It's like, oh, okay, buddy, I hear you. And he said, no, I'm telling you. And so this was probably around 8:50, so a few minutes after the first plane hit. So I took a walk back to the ABC newsroom and I said, have you guys heard anything? And they said, no. And literally, as they said no, phones started ringing. Everything was like, it got crazy. It might have even been just 2 minutes after it hit. Everything started to go nuts. So ran back into the studio, got the guys, we went in. And from then on, we were taking calls. We had a woman on the phone, and to this day, I actually just heard the tape of this moment on PLJ the other day, last Friday. A friend of mine found it and played it back, and it was us talking to this woman. She was in the second building. It had not been hit yet. And she said, it's really distressing. She said, I'm way up high, but I can look down and I can see people running out of the building. And she said, I saw somebody throw a computer through a window trying to, I guess get air or something.
Sure.
And so we're talking to her. Then we take a few other phone calls. And as we're on the air, the second plane hits and you hear all of us just,
right. Because you had monitors on, in the studio, right?
We had, television monitors, and truthfully, we could already see smoke we were very high up. We were above in that building, or right near the Empire State Building, right above Penn Station. So, and looking south and west, so we could see the beginnings of what was the conflagration, or going on. And but we were like. And one of the guys said, oh, my God, we're under attack. And And, you just sat there and thought, what are we watching? A little after that, we had a guy call who said he was in the top of very high up in the building. He said, we went to the fire exits and there's no way down. And he said, but we're staying calm. The loudspeakers are on. They're telling us they'll come and get us. And we just want everybody to be calm. And he mentioned his wife's name and said, I just, want her not to worry about me. He sounded eerily calm. And of course, no one above where the planes hit survived that day.
Right. And the woman who initially called, do you have any idea how she did? Did she make it out or no?
She was also above in the second building above where the plane hit. Wow. So numerous people that we talked to, we stayed on the air until 8:00 at night. People even wandered up 7th Avenue from downtown, walked up covered in ash. And some of them came into the studio and we put them on the air and they spoke. We had, hundreds of phone calls from people looking for family members.
Well, but there's an adrenaline thing that goes on because of the business where there's a sense of duty and a sense of getting the message out. And because of who you are and who I know you have a calming presence and all that. But in the middle of that, you're a New Yorker. Were you concerned about people you thought might have been down there?
Oh, 100%. But I have to be very honest with you. I also, at that time, was a very young mother. I had a 1.5-year-old at home. Mm-hmm. I had a 3-year-old, and I had a 5-year-old at home. And I remember standing there, and it was like I felt I was aware of my feet. I kept waiting for the building to rumble because I thought we didn't know what the attacks were if they were going to continue.
Sure.
Here we are next door to the Empire State Building, basically above Penn Station at the garden. We were above the garden and the Madison Square Garden. And I thought, and I kept waiting to feel the rumble. And then I looked out at the Hudson River and it was this beautiful September day. And I thought, I can swim that. Because I knew that the bridges and the tunnels were all closed. Sure. You couldn't leave the city.
Sure.
And I thought, I can do this. I was a swimmer. I was on the swim team when I was in high school. And believe it or not, went to college in Illinois on the banks of the Mississippi and with a bunch of kids swam across the Mississippi. We stopped at an island for a little bit and then kept going. I mean, that's a big friggin' river. And I thought,
so who knew that would be your escape plan if needed that day? Isn't that crazy?
I needed to get back to my babies. So
100%.
8:00 at night, I went downstairs. We decided to let, ABC News take over at that point. And my car was parked on the street, covered with ash. And there was a very young policeman standing there crying, sobbing by himself. And I went over to him and I wrapped my arms. I still get emotional. Here we are all these years later. I wrapped my arms around him and he told me that his brother-in-law, who's a firefighter, had gone up in the building and they hadn't been able to get a hold of him ever since. His sister's husband. Sure. And I didn't know what to do for him. And then thankfully some other police officers came up and they said, thank you. We'll take care of him. And they led him away and I drove uptown. My husband was working at K-Rock radio station here in New York at the time. And he had also, he was on the last train that came into Penn Station. He saw the building get hit from the train tracks in New Jersey.
Wow.
He said everybody rushed to that side of the train. They pulled into the station and then they closed everything down after that. He went to work. So he had managed to get a hotel room uptown. And you just saw people, everybody, which never happens in New York, everybody made eye contact. Right. Everybody looked at each other and connected. There was one restaurant that we could see open near the hotel, but they were jammed with people. So they were lovely, gave us some takeout because the hotel had no services. We went back there, ate, went to sleep sort of. And then I got up early in the morning to go back down to work. And I thought, okay, I left my car over by K-Rock. I'll just hop a cab downtown. I went down onto Broadway just above Times Square, empty. There wasn't a garbage truck. There wasn't a cab. In the distance, all the way down by Times Square, maybe 8 blocks down, I could see police lights flashing. So
eerie. I mean, so completely eerie.
It was like a movie. It was unbelievable. Newspapers blowing through the streets. It was the only movement. So and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I walked several blocks across town to where K-Rock was, got in my car, saw a bunch of young masters of the universe. They looked drunk. They were drunk because they started screaming at each other and they started fighting in the middle of 6th Avenue. And I didn't know what else to do, so I started honking my horn and flashing my lights. And they got up and they walked away. And I got down to Times Square going down 7th, and the cops had a roadblock up, and they saw that I had press plates on my car. And he said, "Lady, what are you doing out?" And I said, I want to be with my babies, but I have a job to do. And I told him where I worked, and he said, "Okay, go on down." And I went down there, and, as quickly as I could, because the tunnels and bridges did open up, and there were, fighter jets going over the city because they shut down all the airspace. Other than that, I went home and became a very grateful mother to be there with my kids. And it's funny because I look back now over all this time, and there's a part of me that feels very blessed that my children, were in really good hands for that night, but also that they were so young that I went home with them, and obviously we didn't want to put TV on or anything. They were pretty young for that anyway. And we sat out in the backyard, and they picked up, we gathered a few little leaves and nuts and things like that, and we made a collage with trees, and just sort of, they each drew a tree, and we glued little things to it, and it was like, okay, life can go on. Right.
It's what life should have been. Well, that brings me to my next question, which is, do you have any central feeling of what those next few days were like, or is it just a blur? Because I remember being angry, being incredibly sad, and, just kind of that notion of putting one foot in front of the other, along with this wave of patriotism that we will survive, we will defeat this, we will go on because we're America. And whether that was all idealistic at the time, I think most people felt that way.
Well, you know what? There's something really beautiful about idealism. People say, "Oh, they're just idealistic." Just is not appropriate in the case of idealism. It's a beautiful thing, and it's sort of hopeful, and it's sort of a direction we aim in. And we rarely get to the ideal place that we're looking at, but it's all about growth, and when I look back at what that moment gave all of us, it was a connection that we didn't have before, because we're all so busy and so focused on our own stuff. I'm sorry, I almost swore. We're all so focused on our own stuff that it is that those moments where we take a look around and we connect with other people and we realize what really matters, whether it's your children, the work you do, people you walk by on the street, you feel a sense of connection to them. And as somebody in the radio business, I know that I've always loved my listeners, and it made me love them even more deeply because I felt like we shared pain together, and we shared this moment, and we also shared that sense that we're gonna get through this. We're gonna move forward. And so those next couple of days were sort of a dream, because I was focused on my little ones, but I was still going to work, and I had to drive through the Lincoln Tunnel every morning in my car because I had an SUV, was searched every morning. And I would sit there while they were searching it and look across the Hudson River at the pile. And for months. Yeah,
that hole in the sky, trying to make some sense of that.
It was, and also the smoke and the dust rising up for multiple stories was lit up by the searchlights, because there were people working clearly 24/7 on the pile. It just took your breath away. There was no moment at which you took it for granted. It took your breath away. But it was, I mean, obviously these people that we spoke with on the phone, I could still hear their voices. And then for the first time this past week, when this friend had these tapes that he had gotten through the Paley Center, he had found, a certain number of hours from our show, because nobody else on the show had any tape from those days.
Wow.
Interestingly enough. So hearing that, that connection to these people just welled up within me.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, everybody here and across the country, but I think, not to say anything about any other parts of the country, but when it is right here, right now, it touches you in this really visceral way. I know my husband, a couple of days afterwards, got a call from somebody in the record business on the West Coast that was like, "Where have you been?" And he's like, just kind of surviving. And they really, like, okay, well, yeah, we've been watching what's going on, crazy. And then got down to business and talked about records.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's.
Fortunately, I think that's an exception to the big picture as well, because I God forbid we ever go through anything remotely close to that again. But the unity that we had in those days and weeks, and if I get really generous, stretch it to months afterwards, we haven't seen it again. And, with the political climate we have now, I don't know that we will see it. Now, here's the impossible question, because once you fold COVID into it, I don't know that you can separate it. But is there a sense of how the city is processing this 20th anniversary? Because each year it's a heartbreak. Each year you go through the reading of the names, and it's very personal because it's New York and because you're there. Is this year different?
So funny that you say that to me, because my radio station was toying with the idea of having Scott and I do a pre-recorded 2-hour event talking about it, maybe playing some sound back to run, because 9/11 is on a Saturday this year.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody at work who I admire probably more than almost anybody in the building. He's a really powerful news guy. He said, "I don't think I do that." And I said, "Really?" He said, "You could do it as a podcast," because he said, the beauty of a podcast is people can choose to go there. But he said, we're out on the street right now gathering sound for the 20th anniversary. And I can tell you the tenor here is, after the upset of what we've been through in the last year and a half, people don't want to revisit more upset. He said, so what we've been trying to focus on is more the human element. What arose out of that? Talking to people who maybe lost their dads when they were young, and saying, where have you come from that place? And what did you take away from the time you did have with your mom or your dad, or, whoever it is you lost? He said, I definitely feel like people are not wanting to revisit the pain as much, and maybe focus a little more on our growth and come up with something calm, because we are all traumatized enough by the last year and a half, and arguably the last 5 years.
Yeah, 5.5 years. Yeah, exactly. For obvious reasons. I think that's a fascinating point. It makes complete sense. And I would guess that people around the country feel the same way. Well, listen, regardless of whatever faith you have or don't have in your life, and I always say, I don't care who your God is, whoever it is, get closer to them or closer to her. And
or him.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah, and I just think faith is probably more important now than ever, because there's so many reasons not to believe in goodness, not to believe in the goodness of people, not to believe in the future, not to have hope. And we need the next generation, our kids and their kids, to have hope, because that's our only salvation.
Absolutely. And kindness.
Yeah.
100%. And forgiveness and flexibility. There's so much.
Well, let's not go crazy. The flexibility thing I don't do.
Yeah, forget the flexibility. I take that back. And don't tell me what to say.
Well, listen, it's great to reconnect with you every time we do this, but I just think it's important to hear, because you were in the middle of it that day, and to hear that perspective that we can do it, as you said, on this podcast and others. But for people who are getting buried in this information on a day-to-day basis through normal broadcasting, maybe it's a blessing that the day does fall on a Saturday.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It'll be interesting to see how the city processes it that day, and I'm going to be in the city that day. So I'll let you know what the tenor is.
But, well, even though I'm not in New York, I still feel like I need to protect you in some way. And all I can do is say, stay safe. How's that? Does that help?
Oh my God, I'm glad you said that, because I was not planning to stay safe.
Love you, Patty.
Love you too. Thank you so much. It's so good to talk to you.
If you're interested in refinancing your existing home, or to lower your interest rate, pay off debt, shorten the term of your loan, or renovate your home, do what I did when I wanted to refi a home equity loan, when my sister wanted to finance her home, when my daughter wanted to finance her home. Look, we all call Team Hochberg. Too many of us put it off. They go, this Hochberg guy, man, I'm hearing a lot of things. Steve's always telling me he's a good guy. Look, he's loud. He's direct. But all he wants to do is save you money. And I highly recommend you pick up the phone or get online immediately and check it out as well. With any money situation related to your home, Team Hochberg can, in all likelihood, help. Team Hochberg is truly a team, by the way. Everything related to your house, he's got a guy. So what are you waiting for? Your procrastination isn't going to help you with your debt issue. Your debt isn't going to magically disappear. And the consultation's absolutely free. Call Team Hochberg. Do it now and see if they can lower your rate or pay off debt to reduce your monthly payment, or help you with your credit rating, or help you with a student loan. Look, it's all there for Team Hochberg. They've helped me and thousands of listeners secure low rates and reduce their monthly payments, but they can't help if you don't call 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com. That's 855-563-2843, 855-563-2843, or 56david.com. Homeside Financial and Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 1124061. Back on Live from my office. Again, Chuck Todd from Meet the Press will be on our next episode. And if you're a subscriber or a follower or a liker, you'll get all those episodes and you never miss one. So do that if you haven't already, and download it for a family member, especially your mom or your dad or your grandparents who go, I don't know about this podcast thing. I don't understand it. Help them out. You can pick on them behind their backs, but help them out. The charity worth mentioning this time on this episode is completely tied to 9/11. It's called Tuesday's Children. 9/11 was a Tuesday on that awful day. And very simply, Tuesday's Children provides healing and support in all aspects of life for those whose lives were forever changed by terrorism or traumatic loss. It's a very interesting charity and a good one, and certainly worthy of your support. Tuesdays with an S, TuesdaysChildren.org. Thank you, Patty Steele, and thank you, Ross Cochran, for putting this episode together, as you do for all of them. Ross was just a fifth grader on that day on 9/11. We've had many long talks about it, and between my son and daughter and my daughter-in-law, I know this next generation will be able to take care of business in a proper way, and maybe even fix some of the mistakes my generation made. So thank you, son, for that. I love you for listening, and I love this country. And I'm sorry that 9/11 happened, but it did. And as we move towards this 20th anniversary, I pray for those who were left behind and for all of this country to frankly get its shit together and start believing the ultimate truth. It's not a cliche. We're better together than we ever are apart. God bless America, and stay safe. I'm Steve Cochran, and this is Live from my office.
Thank you for listening to Live from my office. a service of Monkey Run Productions. All rights reserved. The podcast is hosted by Steve Cochran, and it's mixed, edited, and produced by me, Ross Cochran. Steve is available for corporate speaking gigs. He would love to MC your event, and occasionally, he's funny. Thank you for listening. Head to cochranshow.com for more.